Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Doc of Detox show. Today's special guest is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, MD. And you know what? He's known as the slow medicine doctor. And you're going to find out why that statement is so important and why it's so pivotal in where we're going and where the future really needs to go. Okay? So he's been featured in top media outlets, including the New York Times, CNN, and ABC News, and has presented at the leading national and local venues, including GE Corporation, 92 Second Street, Y, and Omega Institute, and Rancho La Puerta. Now listen, Dr. Finkelstein was trained at premier institutes for both conventional and integrative medicine. This is very, very interesting, and this is where we're going today. This is where the cutting edge is when we're looking for a practitioner, and it truly is, okay? So, including the University of Pennsylvania, where he received both his Bachelor of Arts and medical degree, and where he was awarded the honors of the Phi Beta Kappa, Summa Cum Laude, and Dean's List, and the University of Arizona College of Medicine, where Dr. Finkelstein completed an associate fellowship in integrative medicine, studying directly with integrative medicine pioneer Andrew Wild, MD. He's also certified in both medicine and integrative holistic medicine. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Finkelstein.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to speak with you today and all the people who are listening.
Fantastic. So before we start, and I've got some questions I want to ask, I want to know, can you tell me just a little bit, we'll get into it deeper later, but can you tell me what is the definition of slow medicine?
Well, I think you could boil it down to two things. So one notion is, as I studied medicine, practiced medicine for many years, I realized that people are sick, obviously, and they're sick for, maybe you could say, the conditions of the world around them, how they take care of themselves or don't take care of themselves, et cetera. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it's the collective pressure and stress of the world around us that's making us sick. And I think of it as I live and work outside of New York City, and I think of the feeling I have when I'm in New York City is that it's moving so quickly. I'm feeling bombarded all over the place. I have to get out of the way of taxis and people. There's noise. And so that bombardment, which is what I'm sort of relating to here, I'd sort of say is the fast world moving around us at a speed that is just a little bit too much for our comfort. So then I think to myself, well, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine.
Okay.
And then when I think,
can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
Do you think we're programmed to go fast? Do you think they've programmed us? Do you think this is planned? I mean, or do you think that we've just got caught up in our own anxiety?
Well, from the time of, let's say, recorded history, we realize, people were first walking on their 2 feet to get from here to there. And then we were compelled a long, long time ago to develop things like the wheel, and then figure out how to ride horses, and then, make cars. And, getting from here to there was a pursuit of let's get there quicker if we can. And that's a metaphor for how we lived our lives. I think your question is interesting because I think people profit from moving us faster. And those people who could think of innovative ways of profiting, the whole commercial industries out there, could sell us all sorts of stuff as a way to save time and to, provide quick fixes and restoration. And yes, I think we're co-opted. I think we're largely co-opted by the forces around us to sell us stuff. Eventually, we have lost touch with our own natural rhythm, which is not to say there are not times to move fast. But the average rate of speed, you could say, of a human being, I think exceeds our biological systems, and I think it exceeds the way our psychospiritual system could thrive. And so we're plagued by this fast world and how we are caught up in it. And I think addicted and sort of, I think it's really true. We're lured but we have something physiologically in us too that makes it simple to hook us. And I think we have to wake up in our collective consciousness to realize this, and then to take on another plan. And that's where I use that phrase, slow medicine. It's not to go slow like a turtle everywhere. It's to learn to balance the rhythm and to get away from the fast, hyper-kinetic movement of the world into a rhythm which restores peace and tranquility. And essentially the second part of that definition then, physiologically, is to get out of the sympathetic fight or flight response into the parasympathetic rest, digest, feed, breed response, which is, in a nutshell, slow. So that's how I get that term.
So basically, we're kind of on a subconscious level, living with a little bit of illusionary terror that's causing us to stay in a sympathetic level, causing us to maybe dump a little bit too much adrenaline and cortisol, or drip it slowly without even knowing that, and then creating that anxiousness. And then maybe for some of us, it's our main belief or program after a while that's played without us even knowing it.
Yeah, I think there's so many people around us, the dominant culture, that speaks to us in support of continuing on, just like do it faster. We have illnesses. I mean, this is what I learned practicing medicine. This is the reason that I needed to do something a little different than what I had just studied, was I was giving people prescriptions, solving problems short term, but I wasn't really helping them as much as I had hoped I could. Sure, there are sometimes medical interventions you need right away, and they save lives, and they're miraculous, and 100% believe in them. But the chronic stuff, the day-to-day stuff, we're asking sometimes the wrong people to help us when their tools are sharp, when we need something a little bit more rhythmic and slow and disciplined and internal, meaning our own process of living. And so, but there's just a lot of people making a lot of noise about other stuff, and we get lost in the noise. There's so much information out there. We have a hard time discriminating, so we do come from this position of some anxiety and fear. And when we get that way, we go to the safest space. We go to hold on to something solid. And what's right there for us? The medical institution, or conventional religious and sociopolitical institutions. And we sort of think mistakenly that all the answers are there. We have to, I think, take on the mantle of being in charge of our own life and thinking clearly through the questions, and have some good support and good guidance. Some of those things offered to us by the conventional will be what we choose, but there are many other times we have to go our own way and figure something else out.
So basically, I guess what you just said, and I'm not trying to read into it, but we're out of alignment on many different levels, not just on a physical level.
Absolutely. I mean, just like anything in a biological system, the pond gets filled with murky debris. Well, it's not just the fact that not enough water is going into the pond. There's also maybe problems with too much shade over the pond, and there's not the right organisms that are feeding in the pond in balance, and there's somebody's dumping garbage in the pond. So could you say it's one variable? No longer. Once the system gets that polluted, it's a lot of things simultaneously, which is very difficult. It's a challenge to pull it all apart. But that's my work right now, is to try to help people figure that out.
And I think there lies the problem, because when I talk to people and I say, okay, so what do you think the definition of health is? Well, I don't know about you, Dr. Finkelstein, but most people will say to me that, and they don't say it, they say it differently, but it all comes out the same, and that is the definition of health is not being in the hospital or not having a disease. What do you think?
Well, I start off with, okay, what's the definition of the word health? So, the root of the word health comes from an Anglo-Saxon word, Haelen, Haelen, which means wholeness in that language, like the word holy. And the root then is this concept that what we're seeking is wholeness. And so my definition of health is a state of wholeness. That would include a physical body that's working reasonably well, but it also includes essentially our working relationships with other living beings, with the planet, with our internal psychospiritual nature, and then having a purpose for this life. The blessing of being gifted a life to live with this level of consciousness suggests there's something even higher that is important for us. So health to me is a integration of all of those different aspects to drive us to our full potential. And so just fixing the body is not necessarily going to be sufficient. And in fact, our overemphasis on the body often pulls us away from attention to these other factors. And this is what I think you could say, in a nutshell, is the state of the art of Western medicine.
You know, this is the thing for me. I don't know about you, but there's just so much going on. And really, where does your focus go? But for me, sometimes I think about it this way. The majority of the population are not getting the life that they were promised or the life that they could have, because I truly believe that the indoctrination has kind of taught them that they are limited and that there's a special few that will have that life, but God shortchanged the majority.
Yeah. Well, that's a message that you could imagine if you were going to create a manipulative hierarchy to manage people beneath you. You would teach them that message, reinforce it with all sorts of things, and eventually, generations later, nobody would even know where it came from, and it would just be assumed to be the truth. This is one of those questions which I think is really important. Like, where did we start, and what is more factual as far as the evidence for our being and our lives, therefore, and who then do we need to listen to? And we're all, I think one of the other healthy things about human beings is that we tend to be skeptical. We tend to not just leap to trusting other people, but there are powerful people that lure us into the belief that we can trust them. We have to be more discerning. That's really important. I think that's what will save us ultimately. But you're right. I think that we have been led to believe that we don't have that potential.
So basically, maybe we've been programmed not to trust ourselves. And when you lose trust in yourself, then you have blind faith, right?
Yeah. But, then I'll say, and I'll repeat my gratitude for being on this show and sharing a conversation with anyone who's listening. But anyone who's listening to you right now, to us right now, is a person who's skeptical, is interested in really learning for themselves what feels right, what is right. And if everyone was sure that they just needed to go to their doctor twice a year for checkups, they wouldn't be listening to this podcast. We don't spend the time. They're absolutely certain. Why do you need to know? You don't need to look at a map if you know where you're going. But if you're looking at the map, then you have a question. And if you have a question, especially on this subject, and that gives me hope. That gives me hope that there are people out there, a lot of people buying these books, watching these podcasts, talking to each other about the system doesn't feel like it's really working for them, one. And two, the people who are leading that system, I question. And I'm seeking wiser, more believable voices that I could incorporate into my life. Maybe just try them on initially. Nobody has to jump ship and do this on blind faith. My work, interestingly enough, is predicated all my life on I'll say science, which is not the science that we use to pretend that everything is evidence-based. I want to be careful that, I think there's limits to science, but there are empiric observations of smart people over long periods of time that create a database that we can use, not as the absolute be-all and end-all answer, but provide us with information. And the first question is the information good? And then can I use my own intelligence? I need to trust myself or talk to people I trust or come together with people I trust and help figure this out. And I think this is the venue, essentially. It's this information technology that has really exploded over the last couple of decades that is now going to allow people the platform to reconsider who they're listening to. And that's going to help reshape the world.
Absolutely. But I think that, you touched on something really important, and that is that, and not the majority of the population, we're talking about almost 100% of the population doesn't realize that about 135 years ago, the medicine of today never existed. People had
Right.
gardens they had their gardens in their backyard. They were doing their own herbs, things of that nature. So, most people today thought it was all in their minds, because their minds doesn't really, I don't think their mind really think about it. They think that it's always been like this. So, how do you take a culture that is based in, let me see, suppressing the pain, thinking pain is an enemy, thinking that disease is a disease and not just a symptom, and then the worse the disease is, it came from the same symptom and it started off that way. How do you get a culture, and how are we going to get a majority of the population to ever understand that, this is not what human life is based on, if they never saw what it was based on, and if nobody really talks about that?
Yeah, it's a challenging situation. I believe in a tipping point will be reached, and then there'll be a shift that will happen for a lot of people who will trail. So what I focus on is getting people to take on a leadership role, even if it's in their own household and among their own friends and family, and to realize that they themselves have this power from their own experience of their own current life, which is to know that it's not just all about the physical body, and to realize that a healthy life, a good person, a person who dies at the end of their life, no matter what their lifespan is somebody who looks back without regret, who feels that they were serving others in their homes, in their communities, humanity as a whole, and they basically die with a smile on their face. That's what most people's objective is, not to prevent death altogether. And when most people understand that objective, to prevent death or even to put it off indefinitely, is in itself somewhat of chasing your tail, and it distracts people. And the enterprises that support that are not to necessarily be fully trusted. And so there are people who I think really get this, and they're going to keep talking. And eventually, because of, again, the airwaves and all these messages out there, that we're going to get to a critical mass where there'll be a shift. I believe there's a quantum physical explanation for why that shift will occur. And my work then is devoted to feel this intuitively, looking to understand it more intellectually, and putting those two things together to articulate to the people right around them that this is the path. So it's challenging, but I think I just want to speak to people who get a little bit of it, who like what they're hearing, not because they believe it entirely or they understand it entirely, but it feels right to them, and it feels better than what they've been led or misled to believe from others.
Where should I start? Okay, so I'm considering that I will start to consider myself on those many different levels. Where do I start? That's what people they don't even know how to start. And then, the big thing is that where do I go, and how do I get that first step
Yeah,
in front of the
yeah,
other one?
yeah. So I say to people, I use the analogy. So you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. So let's say I wanted to get to see you. I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to drive to see you. Well, if I didn't know I was on the East Coast and you were on the West Coast, I would have no chance. We would meet only by luck. So I need to know not only, where I am right now, but I need to know where I'm going. So the first step to me is to get very clear on those two endpoints. So the where I am now is essentially taking an inventory of your life. This is what I've created in my book, Slow Medicine, which is based on 77 questions that can be used as an inventory of things like, what's my relationship like with my parents? Do I play? Do I feel joy? Do I get outside? Am I connected to nature? Do I move my bowels every day regularly? I mean, these various questions, that is an inventory. They're random to some extent, but they're put together to be a pretty good, complete analysis of those areas of what I call a wheel of health, which is our relationships, our community, our life's purpose, our physical and emotional health, our relationship to the divine, et cetera. We put those all together, and that's where I am now. That's the inventory I take. And I get a metric of some sort. I'm in good shape in some areas, not so good shape in others. That's okay. It's not about judgment. This is where I am. Then I say, which gets back to the question you asked, what is health? I want to know where I'm going. And so I have to have a very clear definition of health and a clear idea of what I'm trying to achieve. Now, if I just want to take care of my body, then I'll practice to run a marathon. And I'll run 26.2 miles a year from now, and I can say my body is great. But if that's my definition of health, I'm missing out on all the other things. I might come home from that marathon and have nobody to talk to or eat dinner with, and I am sad and lonely. I am not a healthy person. So to me, an individual needs to take the inventory of where I am, what can I improve, what's good, what's working well, and where am I really going? What does it look like when I'm there? And it's not perfection, by the way. It's about things working reasonably well, but enough things working reasonably well that the wheel turns. Enough spokes are in that wheel that doesn't collapse with underweight.
So basically, you're trying to get people to at least just start and say, if I had the power to create the life that I deserve and the love that I deserve, what would that look like? And at least start the wheels to turn, and then hopefully get the mind to buy in that we can do that, right?
Yeah. Well, the
Okay.
first step is to get clear. If you were in a room right now and there was smoke filled the room as if there was a fire, you start to panic. Obviously, you would not be happy. But if you saw the exit sign on the bright red exit sign over the doorway, you wouldn't be happy that the room was burning down, but you would know where the door is. You would get out. If you're in that room and you can't see a door, you can't see an exit sign, you are in a state of fight or flight, sympathetic overdrive, and your body is going to suffer. And your mind's is immediately suffering. And so the first thing is to know the path, to see the door, at least the first step. You got to go in a direction. So it's those two endpoints. I know where I am. I know where I want to go. Now you get, what you're saying then is absolutely correct. Now I have to fill it in. Now I have to have some idea what I'm going to do to get from here to there. And I've got all sorts of different options out there. Some people, it might be I got to take care of my relationships. For some people, they may need to take care of their body, like what they're putting in their body, or are they allowing their body to cleanse properly? Are they eliminating all the gunk that's accumulated? For some, it's their relationships. For some, they're working really hard and they hate their jobs. They hate everything around them. They don't feel meaning and value and purpose in their lives, and they don't have any drive. Essentially, they're just going through the motions of living. So people have different needs once they get through that first doorway. And that's where they can benefit from guides and support and a good community. But to me, it's not rocket science. And in fact, it doesn't require science. Some of this stuff is so basic and practical that anyone could do it once it's sort of clear on what the objective is and where they are. Then there's things you add on top of it. There might be a particular diet. There might be supplements. There might be modalities. There could be some Western medicine you may need. But you then apply those to a model that is going to get you from here to there. If you didn't know where there was and you didn't know that you're going to the West Coast, well, you would just be wandering in the desert, spinning in circles, and you can put all the good food you want into that body, and it won't necessarily get you there.
Absolutely. And when you were saying this, something really triggered in my head. And only because this has happened quite a few times, and even just in the last year, when I would be dealing with cancer patients, and I'm going, well, why didn't you do anything? Why did you let it go this long? And they would just say, well, I didn't want to do what was offered, so I didn't do anything. So I just tried to forget about it. So, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's when people feel, I'll say, hopeless or disheartened, because they're not seeing light. They're not being given practical advice, and what they're offered is toxic. And sometimes we want to put a toxin in our body, by the way. If you have a rip-roaring infection, you might put an antibiotic in your body. However, it has to be balanced, and there has to be clarity in why. And then every person who I've ever written a prescription for asks me, isn't there something else? Or what kind of side effects might I get? What can I do about them? When I was in medical school, I learned a little bit about that, but not enough. That's why I went back to school to study integrative medicine and really focused my attention on other systems of health and healing. So I had a better answer for that. And what really struck me is a lot of things, as I said earlier, that people can do don't cost anything. It's how you take care of yourself. One thing that I tend to share with people, I live and work on a small farm now. So I live about 50 miles outside of New York City, and my office is a small working farm. It's beautiful, tranquil, bucolic, and it's where I live, and so it's also where I work, and I didn't really want to be in a clinical setting. But it is an ecosystem and balance type of setting. So to me, when I think of health, what does health look like, then I'm showing them my backyard. I'm showing them my garden. What I say about my garden in particular, where the vegetables grow, is, I got all these seeds that I collect, in the winter. I don't dare stick them in the soil in the spring until I work the soil, until the soil is healthy enough, till the season has moved into spring, where I'm not going to waste my time sticking those seeds into soil that's not ready. And this is what I think health is like. We have all these modalities out there, but we're not taking care of the soil. And we're going to stick those seeds into soil that's out of balance, frankly. It's either filled with toxins, it's depleted of nutrients, it's not getting enough light, it's not getting enough water. I mean, you can say the same thing for a human being who's sick. And so it's simple to be a gardener. Just spend a week with the soil and then stick the seed in. It's straightforward. It's not rocket science. I mean, it is now scientific. I mean, there's all sorts of, agricultural cooperatives now that can tell you all about your soil. And you might, benefit from studying it a little bit. But it's been done by human beings way before the first textbook was ever written, way before the first scientific experiment was ever undertaken. So this is something that all people, going back to like who can do this, and people often feel like it's beyond them. But no, people a lot less educated than us, at least conventionally educated, figured this out a long time ago. And this is basic stuff, and you cannot grow vegetables if you don't take care of your soil.
Excellent. So in talking about that and making you start to think about the soil, the body in so many levels, what was the tipping point that kind of got you away from conventional medicine? Not totally away, but just made you move more into slow medicine and saying, I've got to take a look at this. And then even having you write the book, Slow Medicine. So let's take the first one, leaving more conventional and leaning into slow medicine.
Well, so, I'm not going to take a really long time, but this statement is going to worry you. I wanted to become a doctor when I was 7. So I'm not going to start from the age of 7, but I was 7 years old when it became clear to me that that's what I wanted to do. And so I was a young boy. And when I was 7, 1967, if you think about what healthcare was like, the institution of medicine, the Western medicine was like at that time, it was really in a good place. This was 20 years after World War II. Pharmaceutical industry was just getting started. People's lives were being saved with simple things like antibiotics. Coronary care units were starting to open. People weren't dying from heart attacks and infections. And of course, we know that makes a big difference in terms of longevity. Those are such big issues that plague people forever up until the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So when I was 7, looking at my doctor, a pediatrician, I would say, boy, that's a great thing to do. I just wanted to help people. I just wanted to be able to keep people feeling vigorous and alive. 20 years later, when I graduated medical school, a lot has changed. As you pointed out, this has been a 135-year cycle from holistic medicine, which was all that existed, to what we now have, which is reductionistic material-based medicine. And the interval of time between doctor and patient started to erode. The working personal relationship was really affected. And being a doctor was not the same at all as to what I had wanted to do. I dealt with it. I didn't know better, but honestly. And I was carrying on, but I would have been one of those very depressed physicians had not something happened to me. So it wasn't my plan to change. It was just building up from inside that I was struggling like my patients, frustrated that I didn't have better answers than the prescriptions I was writing. And then I was about 40, on schedule for my midlife crisis, and my own blood pressure started to rise. And I said to myself, gee, if I was my own patient, I'd be writing myself a prescription. And I said, I don't want to take that stuff. And it dawned on me how important that issue was, and that it wasn't any longer acceptable for me to not have an answer. Now, it had to happen to me first personally, I'll admit, but it was building up for quite a while. So it was around the age of 40. At that time then, but again, I'm not even sure anything would have changed. I might have done what a lot of doctors do, which is just hang on there. It's their job. Now it's paying their bills. They can't just jump out of it just because they see some problems with it. So we know that hurts physicians. People I tend to respect quite a bit as individuals. I feel for them. They're often in a dilemma like I would have been. And I'm not sure I would have gotten out of it had I not been basically given a gift. And the gift that really threw me over the top, that got me to wake up, happened on 9/11. So on that day, 2001, I was also happened to be at that point the medical director of the hospital where I had my practice. So I became medical director of a community hospital that was about 45 miles from New York City. And on that day, 9/11, one of my jobs was to assemble the trauma teams, to wait in our conference rooms, to be called down into Manhattan to do what we could to rescue and save and help people who were injured. And as everyone knows, there wasn't a lot of that to do. So it was a particularly brutal day from the point of view of our medical profession. On top of which, of course, since we were 45 miles away, there were a lot of people in our community who were killed in those buildings. And so it was really a depressing day. But that day, a gift arrived. And a man in our community brought a check for $1 million to the hospital. And he said, the world is collapsing like these buildings. And I see the suffering in this community. And I live here, and I want to do something. Very wealthy man. So he was very philanthropic, had a great heart. And he said, I want to give you this gift because I want you to rebuild the medical institution around a vision that I think is going to be the future of medicine. And he said, integrative medicine will be the future of medicine. Just as an aside, since I live here, if I ever roll into your emergency room, I want you to have the services that I would want as a patient. Well, the president of the hospital and I were sitting in the room, and the president looked at me and he said, Michael, do you know what he's talking about, integrative medicine? This was 18 years ago. And I said, nope, never heard of it. He said, well, Michael, you're the medical director, so you need to find out. So for my job, I had to study integrative medicine. But it came at the time where I was struggling with what I had learned as being limited and limiting. So now I get this opportunity to enroll in whatever program I want to study integrative medicine and to take this gift and to do something in my community. And so I did. I enrolled in Andrew Weil's program at the University of Arizona, studied for 2 years there, and basically was completely retooled and reshaped with an understanding of health and healing that I did not get up until that point. And I was blessed essentially with an awareness and a vision and practical knowledge that I then really wanted to translate into a working document that all people could have access to. And that's when I started to write this, which could connect the dots. Because, one of the things that is true, people, as much as they might complain about the limits and the limitations of Western medicine, tend to think about going there when they're not feeling well. They're still sort of hoping that there's something there that will really help them. And they respect and they trust the institution. They appreciate the science, even though they know it's limited. So what Andrew Weil taught me and has said is people want the best of everything. They want good Western medicine, but they want open-minded physicians. They want an open-minded culture. They want support. They want their medical insurance to cover other ways of taking care of themselves. And that's essentially the practice that I've worked to create, and the world I'd like to, or the message I'd like to deliver in the world to help us all have access to such a model of healthcare.
Do you
That's
actually?
a long answer.
Well, no, it's great. It was great. I'm glad you didn't make it shorter. Do you actually see that insurance would ever sway that way? I can't see it because that would be
Yeah.
big pharma just saying, okay, do whatever you want. We don't mind if our profits are going to cut down this year.
Yeah. No, I think there's forces against it.
Yeah.
Substantial forces against it. So again, my faith is on people. and to make the changes they need to on their own in their
Okay,
own lives.
but what changes would that be, and what would you tell a person? Because the reality is that whether we want to believe this or not, we are physical, light energy beings. But the reality is that the subconscious brain is just a computer that holds prominent beliefs, and for most people, 70% of their beliefs are actually undermining their health and killing them, but it's still overruling everything that, how do you come up against such strong beliefs and such strong advertising, such strong media, and they go home to the same people with the same beliefs?
Well, I I hear that, and I agree with everything you said in terms of that's a challenge. So, um, I don't know that I have a phenomenal answer to that question. My inclination is to teach, is
There
to
it
get
is.
out there and to educate and hopefully inspire people to have clarity in their vision and their own purpose, to take this on with more of a commitment to that bigger consciousness collective, and to see that that will not only translate to something in the future, but actually will help them now. So if you're now suffering from anxiety, physical pain causing anxiety, emotional pain causing anxiety, debilitation in any way, your body is reeling. It's reeling. In addition to your mind having those issues, your body is suffering from the inflammatory responses, the molecular processes that occur when you're under such a state of distress. If I can alleviate anxiety a little bit in people because I give them clarity of the path, if I show them the exit door, if I give them information that they can believe in, something practical they can do, then incrementally the anxiety level goes down a little bit. Immediately that translates to something positive happening in their body. There's a tipping point for each person. If I can keep on that, if I can keep supporting people, if we can build communities of online communities where people support each other, give each other encouragement, and provide tools, information, education, and inspiration, then I feel we could do it. Um, that's the best I could do. The word doctor in Latin means teacher. So I get to that. Well, my role then is not a fix-it man. I'm not here to just repair the broken parts and send people back on their merry way into this very challenging climate, but to try to help people get back in the driver's seat of their own life, figure out where they're going, and do it. And yeah, it's going to be fits and starts, and people are going to struggle. But my work, I see people doing it, and it gives me a lot of hope.
Okay, so on another note, where do you see the future of medicine going then?
Well, so I'm really excited because finally I'm seeing a dot, or two dots being connected. One is the physical body, and the other is finally quantum physics. So I say that, and it may sound very odd to people. What's that mean? Quantum physics to me is the most nuanced and important subtext to all that we understand as life and systems of life. Yet in medicine, Western medicine, we've had this real disconnect of elemental forces, literally, atoms, electrons, protons, and photons, light energy, packets of quantum light energy, and its impact on biological systems. There's been this convenient, let's just take care of the macro. I've got a tumor, let's just carve it out. I understand why that would be the inclination, but there might be another way to do it. And if one applied some of the principles that are now finally evolving in quantum physics to show how light energy affects the physiology of the body, there's a whole new paradigm out there waiting to be snapped up. And that's what I'm really excited about. So I think the future is going to be more of that. So, and when I use the word quantum physics and photons of light, I mean everything that's alive, every biological system, every chemical reaction, everything that moves generates an electromagnetic particle, a packet of light called a photon, everything. So in every one of our cells, and those 45 trillion cells, more or less, in the human body. In every one of those cells, at any given time, every second, there's 100,000 chemical reactions. Each one of those chemical reactions generates a photon of light. Every time the DNA contracts, it's a double helix. It's sort of a spiral, and it's like a spring. It moves. Every time it kinetically moves the DNA of our body, a photon of light is generated. Einstein said we are light beings. You use that phrase, we are light beings. We are. We're generating all sorts of light in the form of these quantum photons that are biophotons that are being released out into the universe. And we're swimming in a sea of biophotons created by all life that exists now and has ever existed, because biophotons are not blocked by anything. They're too small. They just keep going out into the universe, and basically we're just swimming in a deep sea of it. Well, these biophotons affect us. Every thought we have generates a biophoton. Every toxin in our body blocks a biophoton. And so if we could just learn to work with biophotons, then we will see a whole new avenue, a whole new paradigm for how we then can heal systems that are dysfunctional. And that includes our body, but includes our psycho-spiritual, psycho-emotional state, and even this idea of the quest for, immortality, or the meaning of life, the explanation for why sages and prophets over all these times that was so clear on certain things like the concept of love and what that means. And if you translate that to the language of quantum physics, not that they need to be, but I think in our Western minds, we sort of like the idea of making this real and creating a visual for it and having some evidence for it. Well, I think now there's emerging evidence that can connect these dots. And that's the work that I'm now doing and sharing with people, because I think it will give people clarity on why you take care of the ecosystem of your life, why the microbiome in your gut makes sense, why the level of toxins in the interstitial extracellular matrix space matters, why your thoughts matter, why you might meditate or pray, why some people are enlightened. Even the word enlightened, the word light is in that word. What's that mean? Well, they got quantum biophotons radiating out of their bodies. They're enlightened. You can, if you could see auras, you would see that in a person. And so to me, this is what connects all the dots in everything that we understand. And that to me is a revelation. And
Absolutely.
I'm very excited by it.
So then I guess what you're truly saying, or maybe I'm just jumping to this conclusion, but the reality is we need to teach people what they're not and what they really are so that they can focus on that.
Yeah. It's going to be a real leap. You got that phrase, quantum leap. It's going to be a real leap because we're so concrete. We're so materially oriented. If you can't touch it and feel it, then is it real? Well, this is the answer to why it is real and why it's actually somewhat illusory to think that this, like my hand, is solid. Quantum physics would tell us we're mostly empty space. We've got electromagnetic forces that create fields that seem impenetrable, and they are by bigger objects, but they're really wholly, literally. They're mostly empty space. And if you were small enough, you can get through and weave yourself through the empty space without a problem. Like the solar system, you got the sun and all these really big planets. If you looked at one, it would be very big. You can't imagine, going through the Earth, which seems to be a solid object. But if you look at the whole solar system as a whole, it's a lot of empty space. And you could fly your spaceship in between the planets if you wanted. No problem. And so we are mostly empty space. And a lot penetrates us. And a lot of that is these biophotons that are generated by thought and by consciousness. And imagine if we then attach ourselves not to the physical matter, but to the biophotonic energy projection of our thoughts. Now all of a sudden we see we're waveforms and that we're not even material and that our consciousness resides outside of the body actually, and that maybe that's why it does live forever. Maybe that's why what explains deja vu and all these strange phenomena that people have, which is, why do I think of a friend and all of a sudden he calls me? Like, how does that happen? Well, this is the quantum field. This is the biofield that's a projection of his mind, my mind, and everything in between. it's pretty fascinating stuff, and I hope I could convey it in a way, in a language with visuals. I think it's going to be really important here to make it clear for people so that they see what is true and what is not true. And it's a false truth to think we're solid and that we're matter. I say to people, well, who's listening to me right now? So you've got people who are tuning to us, and who is listening? Is it your brain, the cells of your brain that's listening, or is it some conscious state, maybe nearby your body, but not exactly your body? Who's the, when I say I am hungry, who's the I? Who's the capital I? I like ice cream. Who? You think the cells of your body like ice cream? There's something else that likes ice cream, and it's not physical.
Yeah.
It's going to be a concept that I think some people are going to have to stretch for, but it is the truth. And it will lead to understanding and practical planning that I think will help people.
Yeah, but it's just getting to the point to actually get your mind to accept that the invisible creates the visible, the invisible creates the physical. And you know what? And I think if people can do that, that's the only time that they're going to feel like they have real power.
Right.
As long as you think that it's just a physical situation, that's why people are left powerless. That's why they give their bodies over to whoever, because it's like, they don't know where to tap in or turn the light on, and they don't know that it's light.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but most people have the experience of having that power, and yet they don't recognize that it is for what it is. So, as an example, you could go up to somebody, and you can compliment them, and they might blush, and so you might see the redness in their face, and so your words were received and translated to a physiological response that brought blood flow to the skin of the person you're talking to. Just your words. You didn't touch them. You didn't slap them across the face. That would be something different. But you just said something nice to them. And now their face turned red. Well, that's power. That's exactly how this works. Something immaterial, like a thought, like words, which are just basically electromagnetic fields, audio waves, reach somebody else on a receptor, on a nerve, goes into their brain, triggers a whole physiological response, and all of a sudden you see it on their skin in a matter of, a millisecond. Well, so this is power. We all know this from our day-to-day experience. We have this power. Imagine now if we take those same thoughts and we give ourselves, as I've heard you say, soothing, powerful, positive messages. What happens to us physiologically? This is the alignment I'm talking about. People don't need to be able to repeat the quantum physics. They just need to understand it exists. And just like you said, the non-physical can have a physical effect. And so let's say we do just care about our bodies. There are many people out there that say, fine, Michael, that's really nice, but you know what? I'm sick, I'm in pain. I just want to get out of pain right now. And I'll say, I get it. And so have you thought of using the power of your words, the messaging internally, and the choices of your decisions, like what you put in your mouth, or what you listen to, who you listen to, and understand that those all have power, just the way you could if you tell somebody, you love them and they're the sweetest thing on the planet. Then why not leverage that power? And how hard is that? It is hard, though, because people are given these mixed signals and don't feel great about themselves, and they don't feel powerful. But I want to remind people that they possess this, and it's doable, and it starts with something very basic and simple. And this is what I mean by taking care of the soil. It's just nourish that soil, and it's pretty impressive how quickly there's a turnaround.
So basically, thoughts. They shape the soil. They create the soil. They create the health of the soil, right?
Everything, nothing. I mean, there's this whole. I mean, this may get into the area of esotericism, and a lot of people have limited willingness to sort of stay there. But what you're saying is true. Everything that we see and understand to be real phenomena is somewhat of a has been affected by our thoughts about it. It exists because we think about it, in part, to some extent, it's affected because there's nothing that's disconnected. When we talk about, people talk on religious and faith-based ways of everything is one. Well, this is what that means. This is one biofield, and everything is connected. And the butterfly effect, and all these other interesting things that people have cited as examples of how far-reaching one little beat of a butterfly's wing could be, and how is that possible? But it's all based on quantum physics, which is powerful. Just think about atomic weaponry. It's one atom split apart, and what kind of power is in one atom? It's only fair to understand that there's power beyond our wildest imagination, actually, in terms of just thought and how to use this. So we know it exists. We just have to apply it. This is what I said earlier, which is it's now finally seemingly applicable, practically applicable to our lives. And I think this will be the new paradigm for health. I think this will be, we get out of the reductionistic, materialistic model. Not entirely, because there's time for your appendix to be removed. Healing circles are not always the first choice. But there are, more often than not, there's time for the right mind and the right understanding and the right action.
Yeah, so what you're saying is use logic, but, become a conscious creator and just make logical decisions, whatever that.
Yeah, yeah.
For
and
some
it includes
people.
taking care of the body. Now, I'm not the type of person who thinks that we're just light beings and not material at all. I think we are very material for a reason. I don't understand the creator, aspect of it in terms of why this. This to me, that's a mystery, and that's really interesting. Another conversation. So I accept we have a body. I accept that I have an ego, and I have the desire to serve myself also. But in service of the whole, I think is what often is missing for us. It's okay to take care of this body, but for what end? Where are you going? Is it just the West Coast, or is it the universe?
So what we need to do is we need to take a look at how we're serving ourselves. And there's a way to serve ourselves and serve the planet at the same time.
Right, and that's alignment. And that alignment is very powerful.
Beautiful. So why don't you tell us about SunRaven?
So SunRaven is the name of this working farm that I live in. And it got its name because when I moved in, the previous owners that were here rescued animals, wild animals, that were orphaned or abandoned. And the story goes that in this house that I now live in, which is a converted barn, by the way, so it's an old structure. And when they moved in, they had rescued a raven. Now, New York doesn't have any wild ravens right at the moment any longer, but when this house was then, there was a raven apparently living in a wildlife sanctuary that was closing in New York State. And this couple that lived here built underneath the stairwell of the kitchen, this big cage for a raven. And I knew the story of the house. And I felt like the house had this identity of the raven. So I wanted to give the house a name rather than an address. And I put another word next to the word raven, SunRaven. And that stuck. When interestingly, subsequent to that moment, when I looked up SunRaven, which you now do, of course, if you think you come up with a brilliant idea, you look it up, make sure nobody else has had it before. And I was not the first. In fact, SunRaven is a very well-known totem, meaning a iconic story from peoples of the Pacific Northwest who recognized the raven as this being that one day in the past restored the sun to the sky after it had been stolen by this old grumpy man, leading to a period of darkness. And so the SunRaven turns out to be a story of the restoration of life. And so this property that I have that I thought I was so creative coming up with the word SunRaven is just fittingly connected to this idea of light, and the restoration of light, which, as it turns out, is the path I've been on, apparently. And so it feels like home. It is home. And it's a place where people come and gather. And it's a model, as I said, for demonstrating what an ecosystem in balance looks like. So there's a farm here, and there are rescued animals, and there's a kitchen which is wide open, and everything's in a canister that you can see. So if you come in, and I might talk to you about your diet, but you're also going to see what I eat on the way into my office. And so I'm not just going to tell you, hey, eat a lot of these whole foods, but you're going to pass them on the way into my office, and I'm going to support the message with a visual and a display of how committed I am to it. I wouldn't want to tell somebody to do something that I wasn't willing and ready to do. That's part of what we see from all sorts of advisors in our life, and the hypocrisy, we call it, that leads to undermine our faith in any recommendation. And so to me, it's important to model a way of living as well. So SunRaven is a place where I can do that.
Beautiful. So why don't you tell us, give us your view on what a diet looks like, what your diet looks like.
Well, it starts with consciousness, meaning I want to know, I want my mind to be in a great place when I'm eating. And so, because if I'm eating, let's say, a food that is highly recommended, let's say broccoli, everyone's eating broccoli. So let's say I'm eating broccoli, and I'm eating broccoli because I don't want to get cancer. So on my mind, when I'm loading up my plate with broccoli, I'm saying, well, this is because I'm not going to get cancer. Well, I've now got cancer on my mind while I'm eating the broccoli. And I just shared that, any word that you tap in your head produces a biophoton. Some of them are nice and positive, and some of them are scary as hell, like the word cancer. I don't want that anywhere near my mind when I'm eating. So I want to eat foods that make me feel alive, that connect me to life, that make me feel good. I want a food with a story. I want a food with where I know the farmer, ideally. I want a food that I've either grown myself or I'm supporting somebody I care about that I actually know personally. So I grow a lot of my own food. And when I don't, because I'm here in New York and we're about to put our garden to bed for the next 5 months, so I'm obligated to buy food these days. And so I go to farmers markets, even in the winter. And that's primarily where I shop. So the first part of my answer to what do I eat is food with a good story. Food that makes my mind feel positive about how I'm feeding myself. Now, from there, you need some education, because I could feel really good eating chocolate cake. And I might do that for my birthday and my children's birthday. I don't know I want to do that every night of the week.
Well, here's hoping you don't have a lot of children.
Well, so, but I'm thinking to myself that what's important is, there's time for celebration. When we ask the question, why do I want to be healthy? Well, part of it is to celebrate life and to be with the people you love.
Right.
That doesn't mean you have to eat chocolate cake on a birthday. But I like getting really creative and elevating the energy of the food by making sure each ingredient is as wholesome and filled with quality as possible, which starts with the health of the soil that vegetable is grown in, or if an animal is eating the vegetable, the health of the animal and the health of the vegetables the animals eat it. And so I just think of, where does it start and what's in the food chain along the way? Who's involved? Is this going through a manufacturing facility where people are being treated poorly? Are animals being treated harshly? Is there unconsciousness along the way? In which case, somehow that's tainting my food. So I try very hard to organize that. In principle, it's whole, organic, local, seasonal food that I try to get. And I am always toying with the movement towards like how much vegetarianism, how far to take that. And this is where, when I answer a question like this, I'm careful. I don't think it's the same answer for everybody. And so, but I think we need to be very clear that we don't need a lot of animal products if we need them at all. And that if we were going to have any, They need to be very highly selective. And the same could be said for processed foods. So if it's not a whole food, and somehow it's been manufactured and processed and other ingredients added to it for shelf life or something else, and I think we want to minimize those other foods. And if people go from where they are now and make those improvements in that direction, and let's say they go from the 20th percentile to the 70th percentile, substantial improvement for most people. So I generally talk to people one-on-one and say, where are you now? Let's take an honest, good look at what you're doing. Snap a number on it, not because we're judging it, and just say, can you improve that? Can you, we eat, 3 meals a day, let's say, 30 days a month, 90 meals. I help people do the math. I say, let's just round that up to 100 times a month you eat. And if you want to get to the 70th percentile, can you eat 70% of your meals, 7 out of 10 meals, whole, local, fresh, seasonal, organic vegetables? That means 30% of your meals, or one a day, to include an ingredient that's not. That goes from 20 to 70%. People are making dramatic improvement. Once they get to 70, I might pull them back in a few months later and say, can you get to 80? Can you get to 90? And then usually people can. So the first step, though, is to get clear on where they're going, what the objective is, and then take a couple of steps.
Beautiful. So let me ask you, let's take it a little further. So what's your view on supplements then?
So there's two types of supplements as I see them. One are supplements that are used to replace deficiency. So if you have a certain deficiency you're not getting from food, then a supplement is, that's one category of supplements. The other supplements that might be used, let's say, for prevention or purported health benefits, I think are supplemental, meaning I recommend a lot of them, frankly, but I don't think one should put their emphasis on supplements at with the expectation that they don't have to worry about the soil. And so I want them to take care of the soil. I want them to see supplements as seeds that they're going to stick in soil. And I want them to do both. I don't want them to rely on supplements any more than I want people to rely on medicines. But there's some supplements, like for deficiencies, that you might need to sort of take because you're not going to get them from other things. And in combination, I too am a real advocate of detoxification and cleansing, because a part of the reason we don't absorb and assimilate certain nutrients, and that our energy, our light field, our ability to receive light is impaired, is because in our cells and in the extracellular matrix, we're loaded with toxic material. And the plant in the bottom of a murky pond doesn't grow. It's just, you got to, the light isn't penetrating. And so given that we're light beings, I think that we need to clear that space specifically. And we need to focus on that. And a lot of people hear the words detox, they hear the word cleansing, they hear the whatever, and they think of it as, I don't know what they think of it, quite honestly. But I want to help people see the need for clearing those spaces. And therefore, there are certain approaches, and that might include supplements, that work to bind and eliminate, transport, clear elements, toxic material, heavy metals, chemicals, tissue that's been injured and is inflammatory and is just hanging out there, acid, all sorts of other stuff which is in these spaces, which is impairing our physiological function. And I think that's another area where we need to look, and sometimes supplements are very helpful in that process.
Great. I'm not sure where I read this, but why do you tell people to stop exercising?
Well, here's what I really mean by that. I don't like the word exercise. I don't like that word. So I like the word activity.
Okay.
I like the word engagement. I like the word dancing. And so I'd rather, just like what I'm saying, with eating and food, I want to have in my mind a really good story. I want to have some positive thoughts. So if I'm thinking exercise, very often I'm exercising. I'm motivated to exercise because I fear a disease, and this exercise is going to prevent a disease. And so not everyone uses the word exercise for that reason, but most people I know do. And I want people to do what they love. I want people to go out there and run because they love running. They love the woods, and they're going to hike in the woods. They love holding on to rocks and climbing up a mountain. They love dancing. They love swimming. That's great. That would qualify as exercise. I understand that, but I don't like the word exercise. And so I want people to say, I'm dancing today. I am moving my body with joy today. I am fishing because I love standing in a stream and just being close to fish. And it'll have better, more powerful benefits because you now couple the power of the mind and the thought process with the activity, which is good for your body. I'm not arguing the fact, although we can over-exercise. I think that's the other side of the discussion is, although a minor point, some people overdo it, and then they hurt their body. But that's not where most people are. I want people to be active in something they love and they're passionate about, and I don't think they need to use the word exercise to describe it.
That's so logical. That's totally logical. And it's all about just, really it is. It's all about doing what you love and loving what you do. So how do you feel about cleansing and detox? And why don't you let our viewers know your opinion on that?
Well, so in my early re-education, the first conference I ever went to, the first holistic medical conference I ever went to, it's really an interesting story. I flew to Denver. This was October 2001. So this was a month after that gift came, and I was told to go study integrative medicine. So I looked up conferences, whatever, and there was an American Holistic Medical Association conference in Denver, Colorado. And so I went, and the first speaker was very impressive. I didn't know he was the first speaker initially because he opened the conference with a drum. He had a hand drum, and he came down the aisle of this big conference center, beating the drum, and he had no shirt on. He had some feathers in his hair, paint, and I thought, where I'm in Colorado, and so this is a, sort of a Native American opening ceremony. The guy jumped up on stage, had a PowerPoint, clicker in his hand, and he started his PowerPoint presentation. He's a physician from Arizona, and he's just going to share his work. So this was very new to me, this whole scene. But what he talked about, the first material I learned as I started to relearn was about his retreat center in Arizona. And his core program was a 7-day green juice fast. And he made a scientific presentation on the imperative, the value of fasting, cleansing, the physical benefits and the spiritual benefits. And it stuck with me. It was just overwhelmingly powerful. I was moved. And so I had in my mind that I was going to do that one day. I was going to do a 7-day juice fast. And I graduated 2 years later, about an hour from his place. So I went to study with Andrew Weil, who's in Tucson, Arizona. And this other guy, Gabriel Cousins, who's pretty well known, had his place in Patagonia, Arizona, about an hour away. And I gave myself as a graduation present a week-long juice fast. And so I went from my graduation ceremony to Patagonia to spend a week drinking a green juice and nothing else. Well, I was pretty sick. I had a fairly significant detox reaction. I was, I understood it at that point. It was welcome because I was so happy to get the stuff out of my body. But I realized how powerful it was. When I was done, I was completely new. I felt 10 years younger in 7 days. I couldn't believe what happened. I went back 6 months later just to see if it was true. And again, it happened. And then I realized, this is my own personal experience. I wasn't teaching it at this time. I just felt compelled to do it. After the second time where I had this reaction, I said to myself, well, this is something I need to do like 2 or 3 times a year, maybe every season. And then I said, well, I can't go to Arizona for a week every time I want to do this. I think I have enough tools. I'm credible enough to do it myself. And maybe I'll invite a group of people who are now, in my community to do it with me. And so that was 2005. And from that time on to today, I lead a 7-day green juice fast 3 times a year. I do that now at Rancho La Puerta largely, which is this place in Mexico that you alluded to, which is an incredible retreat center because it's a place that just offers a lot of support in that process. But what I've learned on top of all of this, and you answer your question more specifically, when I now have done this with hundreds of people, and there's other types of fasts, by the way, there's shorter fasts and there's different types of programs, but the principle is the same. You've got all this gunk that accumulates. Even if you live healthily, even if you haven't been exposed to pollution, which I don't know anyone who hasn't. But let's say you say, I'm pretty clean. There's still value. The cells of your body turn over. There's all this stuff we do accumulate. There's, even if you're organic, there's glyphosate in the food that you're consuming, unfortunately, and the water you're drinking, and the air and the mercury amalgams and the aluminum and everything else is all over the environment. And we accumulate the stuff. And when people unload it, dramatic things happen in their mind, body, and spirit complex. And so I say this, and I really mean it, as a physician, there's nothing I know that's as powerful of advice to give people than a juice fast. And more generally, a fasting program, a good fasting program, or a cleanse program. And fasting is one way to do a cleanse. But I can't think of anything I've ever learned to do that in 7 days transforms people. And it's often what I recommend people do. Getting to the question that you and I had discussed, sometimes just getting started, people don't know where to get started, and sort of it's just overwhelming, and they just feel helpless, hopeless. It's not easy to get people to just not eat for a week. On the other hand, for those who find that intriguing, as I did, the experience itself will be the only thing they need. When they're done, they will be transformed. And it's 7 days. Yep, it's an arduous 7 days, but it's a pretty miraculous transformation. And I don't know any tool I have that will help people make that type of move that quickly. And again, that's part of my education and message and what I try to inspire people to do. It's definitely not for everybody. There's more people I speak to who say, you're out of your mind. I'm not going to not eat. Isn't that the way to sort of get sick? And I understand the question, but there's a smart way to understand what your body's trying to do and facilitate it. And how important that is really the message I want to communicate.
Beautiful. And you know what? I think on a logical level, people understand that it's great to go on a holiday, and it would be great to give your digestive tract a holiday. And yeah. I think that, the first step that they need to understand is that we are electromagnetic light energy beings, and even that's a little hard to digest. But the reality is that we're getting our energy from just so many other places, and people do not understand that in most cases, the meals that people eat take more energy than they give. And that's why, everybody out there, just think about this for a second. How many times have you eaten and part way through the meal, you feel more energetic? By the time the meal's done, the only difference that you feel is that you're fuller, but you're not feeling any more energized. Yeah. So, there's food for thought right there, right?
Absolutely. It's and when we understand the mechanisms, we could make better choices.
Yes, we can.
It's as simple as that.
So, let me ask you another question. So, what are you working on now, and what can you tell us that you're discovering new or different?
Well, I shared with you this quantum physics stuff that I'm working on, and yeah. I'm translating that into 2 books that I'm working on right now. So one is specifically on the subject of cancer. So the working title is Slow Cancer. And the idea is, it's a monumental problem that we're facing. Individuals, millions of people every year, just in this country alone. Worldwide, it's countless. It's clearly an epidemic, and people are distressed when they think that their only course of action is the Western medical model. And I would quickly add, I think there's a lot of value in what Western medicine can offer in support, but I see that as a piece of something that's bigger. And the question then is, well, what do I, if I was a patient with cancer, want to know? What are my options? And what can I coherently with validity put together for myself that will improve my chances? I think people want to answer that question. And they want some guidance. Now, there are other books out there, and there are other people who speak to that. But I'm working on one, which is a collaborative effort, hoping you're involved with it as well, because I think that we have a lot of synergy to speak on this subject, to connect some dots for people and to give them clarity on how they can do it. So that's one. And the other is specifically on the subject of this new paradigm and the idea that if we rethink our physical being as a light receptor, a generator of light, but also as a light receptor, then we could imagine for ourselves quite clearly and practically another way of taking care of this body and this being. And I want to elucidate those principles in a way that excites people to then understand why some of these other recommendations, why it matters what you think, why it matters what your environment is like, why EMF does matter to you, why toxic load does matter to you, and not just think of it as somehow sort of secondary approach, or when I'm feeling better, I'll get there. I want to turn that over. I want people to understand that in order to heal, you need to thrive, not the other way around. In other words, you're not going to thrive when you're healed. You're going to heal when you thrive. And to thrive means to generate the most light and to receive the most light. When you figure out what that looks like for you as an individual, you're going to be thriving. Then your biological systems, which have this incredible healing mechanisms already built in, will work better. And so I want to shift the focus from the disease and the need to heal from disease to the very positive objective of learning to thrive. And I think that can be applied in medicine, but also in every element of our lives to improve the quality of our lives. And when we do that as individuals, of course, collectively, maybe we get through some of these other challenges that we're facing as human beings on this planet at this time, which of course deserve a lot of attention. But I think all of this could be aligned, frankly. I think it's the same principle. A healthy individual will create a healthy environment. The more healthy individuals there are, the healthier environment. And it starts with what's on our mind and what we choose to become.
Beautiful.
So I want to write that.
And I love how you said, even if you're not feeling well, even if you're feeling down, let's thrive now. Let's hold that thought about thriving now. And I think that's a big issue right now, because I don't know if you hear it as much as I do, especially with anybody with an autoimmune disease that they feel their life is threatened, or even with cancer, where they'll say, you know what, I'm a survivor. I'm a 7-year survivor. I'm a 10-year cancer survivor. And I think we've got to up the game more and get rid of that word, because we don't want to continually fight the war. We want to become the hero we're looking for.
Yeah, well, so it gets to that word again, just like exercise is a word.
Yes.
It's sort of correct, but is it the best choice of a word?
Right.
And so if words are tagged with quantum energy.
They are.
Well, use your words, then use the words that have the most energy. And the words that are of the language of war have a different energy than the words that have a language of creativity. And so I could rip something apart, tear it out, break it apart, kill it. Or I could build a life that's whole and full and exciting. The creative is much more powerful. And if we could just rehearse different messages and align to those messages, we not only just maybe think better, but that translates to a quantum packet of energy, which is different. And our body will respond because our body has the receptors for that energy. And it's not only one step forward and not taking a step back, it's actually 2 steps forward, because if you don't keep taking steps back by words that bring up fear and anxiety and war, you are a pure positive, in a more pure positive state. It's not like we can forget about it, though. When we have a near-death experience, we survived it. The word is fair. However, I'd rather be creating an amazing life than running from something that could kill me.
Well, I think there is a time to move on and let go, right?
I think we want to grow. We want to grow
Yeah.
from those experiences. And yes, I think that's, to me, I think that principle of letting go is to evolve. So take what we have, incorporate it, maybe not exactly let go of it, but transform it. Transform the energy in such a way that it becomes more light producing.
Beautiful.
Then it's very positive. Then we take forest fires and we make new forests. We don't just look at the dead trees. We see the growth. We see the beauty. And then we recognize that all the forests on the planet are products of fires that preceded them. And we wouldn't have any of these giant trees if there wasn't a fire. And so now we don't like a lot of fires, and we don't like when they come close to our houses. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a transformative benefit of the element of fire.
Excellent. So before we close, I want everybody to know something, that we're going to be back tomorrow, and we're going to be doing a live Q&A with Dr. Michael Finkelstein. And I'd like you to really think about what you've heard here today, and even other questions that didn't get triggered in your mind. But, you know, we're talking about somebody who's a medical doctor, who has years of experience and is recognized for that. Plus, you know, he's into what we would say alternative, and looking at an alternative way to create a whole practice, to create a whole you. So we want you to get your questions together, and whether you've watched this today on Facebook, whether you watched it on Instagram or YouTube, you're going to be able to send your questions in on the show as you're watching. Just send those in, or you can send them live tomorrow. We'll be doing this show at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we'd love to have your questions. And you know what? Challenge yourself to ask these questions, because growing consciously is basically the best way to grow. Michael, is there anything, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, was there anything that you'd like to tell our audience?
I'm excited to interact with you. And to me, that's where it's at. I think we're in this together. And I like hearing what people are thinking, even being challenged, because it helps me get clear on my own. And ultimately, my desire is to come up with messages that help the most people. And so we can do that probably better together than we can as individuals. So I look forward to sharing all of that tomorrow and at other times if the opportunity presents itself. So thank you very much also.
Well, no, thank you very much. And I've really enjoyed it. And it's really refreshing to see somebody of your caliber actually embracing the world as you're doing it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Dr. Finkelstein, you are the hope. Okay, you're the great white hope, because we respect. I respect the medical system. Listen, one of my children would not be alive if it wasn't for them. Mm-hmm. It's just the coming together, and oh, what a beautiful world this would be.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. It's not either or.
No,
it's
isn't. No, it's not either or. Thank you very much, sir, and we will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So, everybody, I want to thank you for joining me. And this is your show. The Doc of Detox show is your show. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you like, what you'd like to see, because that's truly what it is. We're here to serve you, to help you, to find the authentic you. And it's in there. All right. And also, before I leave, I would just like to say that we have our Q&As every Monday and Friday, as long as I'm not traveling. And you can send your questions in on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and we will answer them truthfully to the best of our knowledge. And know that your health matters. You matter to us. All your questions matter to us. And for those people that are still wondering, our Kelowna combined course, it's full. Okay. And the next course that we'll be doing will be in the new year, okay, 2020. And that will be in Toronto, and it'll be just in the beginning of the year, in the first week of January. The next one will be in San Antonio, Texas in February. Then we will be going to back to here in Kelowna. We'll be doing it in April. And then in June, we're in Palm Springs, okay? For more information, please call the clinic at 855-900-4544. And if you want to speak to me, my extension is 5. And you can always go to itioh.com if you're interested in our certifications, our treatments, or our personal trainings, where we come to you or you come to us and stay here at our retreat. God bless, and know the power to heal, okay, is yours as long as you don't keep giving it away. God bless. If you're looking for life-saving and life-changing information, well, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to click and subscribe. Stay connected.